Hi, I'm Tara Thomas. I'm going to be a junior at Bishop Carroll, and I want to tell you about my Steubenville experience. When I had first heard of Steubenville, I was immediately excited. I have had my struggles with my faith, but I had finally taken the Catholic faith on as my own. This youth conference would be an amazing opportunity for me to embrace the faith even more. After the promo video was shown, Father David said a few other parishioners were going and that we could invite friends of ours. My mind went directly to a close friend. He was one of the only people I would want to invite who had a flexible schedule that I could invite him to something 4 to 5 months in advance. His response was, "Aren't you questioning your faith?" Fair enough. I had thought about that. What if I had once again lost faith before time came for the conference? Something, probably God, told me that I just needed to go. Whether I was still religious or not, I would love it, and so I needed to go. And that's what I told him. He talked to his parents, and they said he could go. I was going to a Catholic conference with my best friend. Definitely not something I thought I'd be doing just a year before. Fast forward to the summer. Prayer in Action had just ended, and I was on what you could call a Jesus high, and I couldn't wait for Steubenville. I started looking at their social media, and I fell in love with the conference before I even had experienced it myself. As time went by, I got more and more excited. I'd also seen a video of my favorite praise and worship song being sung, Hold Us Together. The social media alone had me ready to go. The Friday arrived that we were to set out for Springfield, Missouri. I got to St. Anne, ready for the trip. I had packed all of my stuff and double and triple checked. I had forgotten a lot of stuff at Prayer in Action, and I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Once we got to Springfield, we dropped our stuff off at the hotel, loaded back onto the bus, and made our way to Missouri State University, where the conference would take place. There was a bit of a waiting period before dinner where we just hung out. When we did eat, we got split up, and so I saw a lot more unfamiliar faces than familiar. But it still hadn't registered that there were almost 4,000 people there until I saw everyone filing into the arena. I looked around the arena, seeing how excited and energetic other kids were. Honestly, our group wasn't very hyped up at all, but I understand. They were guarded and may have cared what others thought, even when no one actually cared if they were dancing. I looked up at the big screen. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let God elevate. Yes, I will. I long for it. There were introductions for the team, one speaker had a talk, and there were a lot of songs. I'll admit, I don't remember much about the talk really at all. When it was time for adoration, I had begun to have bad thoughts. I felt bad about my sins. Not just remorse, but shame. I carried that feeling into adoration, and it bugged me for half of it, at least. I shouldn't have felt that way. I knew that. Yes, I should hate my sins, but they are what keep me from being as close to God as I possibly can be. But these were unhealthy thoughts about my sins. I tried to let go of these thoughts, praying so much, asking God to help me rid of these thoughts, since I couldn't do it on my own. Finally, as I experienced adoration, a weight was lifted off of my shoulders, and I felt it physically. The thoughts were no longer hounding me. I felt God's love and mercy flood into my heart and wash over me. I knew before that I shouldn't be holding on to sins that way, especially if I had already confessed them. But something in me just wouldn't let go of them. It finally clicked that if I wanted to strengthen my relationship with God at all this weekend, I would have to hand them over to God. So the rest of adoration was filled with something I had heard at Prayer in Action. I looked at him, and he looked at me. I acknowledged that I am not my sins. That is not how God sees me. Rather, I am a beloved daughter of his, who just happens to have a fallen nature. But that is why Jesus was sent. There is nothing that Jesus can't forgive through the mercy he sends upon us through his death. If I let go of my past sins, I could actually pay attention to the conference. After adoration was small groups, similar to youth group back home. I knew everyone in the group. I just happened to be closer to a few than the others. It was pretty awkward at first, if I'm being honest. Once a few of us started talking, though, everyone felt comfortable to speak up. We talked about what we felt, what it meant to be Catholic, boys, and other stuff. Our group leader mentioned about how that night at adoration was the first time she didn't find her thoughts wandering. As she mentioned that, I realized that I was more focused on listening to the music rather than singing. On Saturday, a religious sister gave a talk to all the girls reflecting on the story of the woman caught in adultery. Sister Miriam told us how we long for and are called for more. Like the scribes in the reading, we must drop our rocks, our weapons which we use to hurt others and ourselves. The rocks may be bad self-image, gossip, comparison, or so many other things. She told us she struggled with addiction when she was younger, and that we need to have a plan to overcome addictions, and to have an accountability partner to help along the way. I could tell you about the other talks, or the things that happen outside of the talks, but what stuck with me was adoration. The Eucharist was processed around the entire arena Saturday night. I fell in love with Christ all over again. I sang my heart out. I didn't care how bad I sounded. I was praising God with music, something I love to do. I found myself leaning in the direction of the monstrance, as though I couldn't get close enough. Christ in the Eucharist was right in front of my face. Pure love. Unlike the day before, I didn't feel any shame of my past whatsoever. And I think I felt what my group leader had the night before. My mind didn't wander at all. It was just Christ and I restoring our relationship. I can't say this enough. It was pure beauty. I was reaching my arms out, offering all that I am to God, falling into my Father's arms. I used to judge people for this, having their arms out, disrupting Mass. But it was only a distraction if you were looking for one, but not here. In that moment, all was perfect. I was crying, and I felt like I looked gross, or as though I was a mess. I had a runny nose and tear-stained cheeks, but that didn't matter. I was encountering God face to face. Who wouldn't be bawling? After adoration, I felt called to go to confession. Within the previous 24 hours, 2,000 confessions had been heard. I was comfortable going during this big event since I didn't have any major sins. On my way to confession, I passed a friend from St. Anne. She was glowing. "I just came from confession," she said. Yeah, I knew. It showed. So we talked for a bit, but the line was only growing, so I made my journey to the end of it. I was a little nervous. What if I had to go face to face? I'd done that maybe once in my life. The line shortened, and my nerves began to settle. I prayed for help of knowing my sins, but all that was coming to me was gossip. I hated it. I've done it even after acknowledging that I needed to stop. I made it to being first in line. There were about 40 priests hearing confessions that night, but as I turned my head, I saw the seat in front of Father David open up. Why couldn't I get a priest who I didn't know? At least, I didn't have any mortal sins to confess. That was the only thought running through my mind. I walked up to him, he cracked a joke, and it calmed the last of my nerves. I said confession and went on my merry way. I realized that we are so blessed, that our God is so merciful and forgiving. When we got back to the hotel, I was first in the shower and was out in 10 minutes. I tried to write in my prayer journal, but the day was so overwhelming and I couldn't write down but one sentence. Adoration tonight was absolutely beautiful. I laid down with a rosary in my hand and fell asleep. The first 2 days of the conference, I had unintentionally been neglecting a friend for whom I was a confirmation sponsor. Sunday was going to be different. We jammed out to High School Musical before the day had started. And once the day did start, we sang, or screeched, our hearts out to praise and worship music. Finally, Hold Us Together was played. I was waiting all weekend for this song. I learned it on my favorite day of prayer in action, so it holds a special place in my heart. I even sang it how I did at prayer in action. I will be my confirmand's keeper, so the whole world will know that we aren't alone. I sponsored this girl as she fully entered the Catholic Church. I love her so much, and I need to be here for her as much as I can be. I pray for her daily. We, as a group of 4,000, prayed over our friends and those around us. Finally, we celebrated a Sunday Mass, and at the end of it, those who weren't Catholic but felt God tugging at their heart were invited to the stage to be prayed for. Then young men who felt that God may be calling them to the priesthood or to be brothers were called to the stage to be prayed for. And finally, the young women of Christ who felt they may be called to the religious life were called forward. I started walking. I didn't stop. I didn't look back, and I didn't want to. I don't know for certain if it's what God has planned for me, but the feeling of being down there with so many girls who felt the same way was indescribable. Everyone was pulled into a group hug, and I knew that if I am called to the religious life, it will not be a boring or lonely life. Rather, it will be one full of love and joy. The walk back to my seat helped me to realize that no matter my struggles in life, if I have God and I follow Him and love Him, I will be okay. That was my Steubenville experience. It was amazing, and I loved every second of it. I couldn't have asked for any more.